Hi guys, hope everyone's well and welcome back to the Improvement Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to touch on losing weight without tracking, as I appreciate tracking's not something that everyone always wants to do, and there may be times where they're in a situation where tracking may not work for themselves. So this video is hopefully going to arm you with the tools and the information needed to know basically how do you put on body weight or lose weight without tracking. Primarily, this is going to focus on weight loss, but the same kind of applies when it comes to putting on body weight as well. So yeah, basically this episode is going to be packed with like structure and habits to help you with fat loss. So regardless if you are tracking, then this is going to be super valuable to hear, because a mistake people make when it comes to tracking is they focus on just making sure that they are in a deficit. They don't focus on food choices. They don't focus on anything else apart from being in a deficit. And the downside to that is what that will ultimately lead to is if you're not picking the right foods, if you've not got good structure and routine, you'll probably struggle to adhere to your diet. Whereas if you have got them in place, then it's going to be much easier to stick to things long term. So, in terms of when you are like tracking, what I recommend is don't just focus on like I said, having a calorie goal and that's it. And when you're not tracking, put these habits in place. So it's all about habit and routine. If we obviously want some willpower, but if we can put more structure in place, that will unconsciously make us eat less, and that's a win. That's going to put us in the best position possible to basically lose weight. So, what habits can we put in place? So, a good habit to have is having like a water goal. So, trying to get in like a certain amount of water on a daily basis. So that could simply be trying to get in like 3 liters a day. Even if, let's say, your water intake's not in a good spot now, you can still improve it. Meaning, if it is at, let's say, a litre, then just try and increase it to 1.5. So don't think, right, where I am now, I need to drastically improve that within a day. Just again, gradual improvements over time. But the reason why a water goal can be good is when we drink more water, typically we will have feelings of fullness. So if we get in habits of drinking more throughout the day and drinking more water around meals, it's going to be better for our general health, and also it's going to mean we're going to limit hunger. Drinking around meals isn't going to be better for your general health, just to clarify, but it's the fact that if you have it around meals, that will typically make you a bit less hungry. And in terms of what else you can do, so a fruit and veg goal. So the reason why a fruit and a vegetable goal on a daily basis, like trying to have your 5 a day or having one with each meal, will help, is because if you get all your calories from, let's say, something super calorie dense, or if you get all your calories from fruit and vegetables, you're going to really struggle to overeat if you're eating a lot of fruit and vegetables. For example, if like I put on a plate 1,000 calories worth of desserts or 1,000 calories worth of salad, the plate would be absolutely massive for the salad, because it's going to occupy a lot of space. It's going to occupy a lot of volume in your stomach. Yes, it might not taste as nice. You might not have as much flavor in it, but that's going to ultimately just be a sacrifice you've got to make. Like you've got to have some element of sacrifice. Nice foods foods that are healthy and or not even healthy but low calorie are often gonna not taste as well, because or taste as nice, because they've not got as much carbohydrates and fats in them, which is why foods typically taste nice. Like if you think about something that's really like junk food that typically tastes nice, it's got like a lot of carbohydrates and fats, like pizza, like pasta. And when you think about things like burgers, the list goes on. So yeah, if we have that fruit and veg goal, then what we basically will have is the ability to eat more actual food volume on a daily basis without going over our calories. Because if you just rely on, like I said, having a calorie goal, you don't focus on having, let's say, a certain amount of fruit and veg a day, your health's probably not going to be as well, which is why you shouldn't just focus on calories. But as well as that, it's going to be super hard to stick to if you've got no fruit and veg, because your food's going to be super low. So sorry if you're watching this on YouTube, the camera just didn't decide to focus on myself for a good 4 minutes, but it now is. So yeah, after a fruit and veg goal, making sure maybe you're having one every meal, or maybe even what I'd recommend, see if you're wanting to maximize adherence and you're struggling with appetite, have 100 to 200 grams of a fruit or vegetable in every single meal of the day. And in terms of like liquid calories, they're something I'd typically recommend not having. And the benefit behind like having like hard and fast rules is you know what is a good choice and what isn't. So liquid calories, they don't fill us up, they don't contribute towards fullness very well, and they generally mean we'll have a higher appetite if we're dieting and we're having a lot of liquid calories. So I recommend just kind of not having them at all, really, if you don't want to. Well, if you adhere to a diet, fine. And let's say you try and lose weight without tracking. You have some liquid calories here and there, but you manage to lose weight, then have at it, keep having them. However, if you're struggling, then it could be an idea just to remove them. It's not that much sacrifice not having an orange juice. You can just have orange, not having, let's say, something in your coffee, and instead just having sweetener, and maybe getting like almond milk or something even lower in calories. So you could potentially try that. But liquid calories, like I said, it's not going to fill us up, so it's not something I'd recommend having, especially in high quantities. Obviously, something very common when folk are trying to get fitness and improve their body composition is having protein powder. So it's a tricky one because obviously it's a good source of protein. It helps you get your protein up. Protein can contribute towards feelings of fullness and satiety, meaning fill you up. But the downside of it is protein like shakes potentially aren't the most filling. So you can be creative. You can put them in things like oats and make them even into like a mug cake, which is something I've done during prep, by just adding like baking soda and water, and then it can help give you a bit more food volume. But yeah, generally would recommend minimizing liquid calories. Next up is having protein with each meal. Not only will this have benefit in terms of our ability to build muscle, and as a result, our ability to improve our body composition, and how we look visually, which is usually why people want to lose weight. Obviously, there's some aspect of their overall health, but it's also just because they want to look better as well. So having protein with each meal will basically do something called spike muscle protein synthesis. If we can do that frequently, it's going to give us the ability to recover and build muscle more effectively. And in terms of like how much protein to have with each meal, if you're not tracking, you don't have to obsess over it, but just kind of like a good ballpark to making sure it's like a fistful if you're not tracking. So you can just use you could even like weigh something out just to say, right, this amount of chicken roughly equates to this much calories, and then you've got like a rough idea, and then you can use that for future reference. But what I say is you shouldn't be that stressed about how much protein you're eating. If you're eating slightly more than you necessarily need to, you're probably not gonna like be harmed from it. You're probably not gonna have much negative drawbacks because it's like I said, it's filling. Proteins obviously helps us build muscle, but it's also satiating, which means it fills us up. We burn more calories when we digest protein. So generally, having a high protein diet, if you struggle with fat loss or weight loss, is generally going to be a good thing. So something I'd recommend. And something else you can do is minimize the processed foods you're having. So foods will pretty much, the majority of processed foods aren't that filling. And what I mean by processed foods is if it's not like single ingredient. So like having like a Squares bar or having things like cereal, or well, obviously the list goes on. And like, but just if you buy foods, try and buy it with one ingredient on the back, and meaning like rice, oats. It could be things like, you know what I mean, like pasta. Could be like fruit, vegetables. You know what I mean, meat sources, things like that. They're typically going to be more filling. They'll help you stick to your calorie goal better, because if you have foods that are processed, they taste maybe nice and they've got a lot added to them. They'll potentially be, for the most part, potentially higher in calories, and also not that nutritious, so they won't have much nutritional value in them, typically. So obviously there's exceptions to many rules, but minimizing processed foods as a whole is probably going to do you some good, and help you with your dieting phase. And this kind of ties into it. Aim for satiating foods, so foods that fill you up. Typically, foods with fibre in them have a higher level of satiety, so they fill you up more. So that's things like vegetables, things like oats as well. So what I'd say is if you are dieting or if you're trying to lose weight, try and like obviously use your initiative with it and kind of like have the awareness of what foods fill you up and what foods don't. For example, you can be creative with it and try different foods. Think, right, when I have pasta, I can inhale it and I don't feel like I'm full at all. And you, on the other hand, you could potentially have things like maybe oats, which fill you up a lot for the same amount of calories, and you feel pretty stuffed and full, and they digest nice and slow throughout the day. So yeah, play about with your food choices, see what foods fill you up more than others. And something that is actually quite valuable to do, believe it or not, is don't make your diet try and taste absolutely amazing. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but sometimes that makes you just want more food. So sometimes just kind of like accepting maybe like it's not going to taste as good as some other food and not trying to make it taste as good as like a burger or a pizza, and just kind of having routine with it, having structure and cracking on can do you some good, because you're going to probably be a wee bit hungry regardless. You're probably going to not have food that's going to taste as good as junk food because it's generally low in calories. And something else to be mindful of is like when you're having things like sauces, not that there's anything wrong with sauces, but just be mindful about how much you use, because you can definitely add up like a lot more calories throughout the day putting sauces on your food, especially if they're high in calories. Like if you just use things like mayonnaise, sweet chili sauce, ketchup, barbecue sauce, you can easily rack up maybe like a couple hundred calories, that like I believe. And you might not think, oh, that's not that much, but that's the difference from you being in a deficit and being at maintenance or putting on weight or maintaining weight. And as well as that, they don't fill us up at all. So you could have, let's say, 2 apples, or you could have sauce on your meal where you could swap it for like a hot sauce that's lower in calories. So again, you don't need to have all these habits, just to clarify, but if you're, let's say, sticking with some of these habits, they're not working, you might need to introduce more. You also might need to kind of be a bit stricter with your, like, what habits you have in place. So adding in more and being, like, if you have some flexibility with it, have less flexibility. And maybe even like I said, having a water goal, fruit and veg goal, a protein goal, you can kind of increase them. So try and have a bit more protein, have more fruit and veg, have less carbohydrates and fats instead. And obviously, like when it comes to having the awareness of what foods are carbohydrate, fats, I appreciate not everyone will, and proteins. But what I could say is tracking is valuable for that reason. It allows you to see what foods have carbohydrates, fats, and protein in them. So it could be valuable just doing that for like a week. And in terms of what else I recommend is learn, or try and have like a step goal in place, and try and learn to develop like a routine that suits yourself and hitting it. And what I mean by that is, like, if you've got a step goal and you just go about it sporadically and you don't have structure in when you're going to get your steps in and how you're going to hit your goal, then you probably won't. Whereas if you plan out when you'll do your steps on a daily basis, you've got routine and structure with it, then you'll probably hit it. It's like in prep, I could tell you a structure I've got in every single day in order to reach my step goal. I had a plan in place all the time. And I know you might think, well, that's restrictive. I don't, let's say, want to do the same thing every day. That's boring. But change requires change. Change requires discipline, and you to put habits in place you didn't have before. If it was easy, nobody would be in a body competition and didn't want to be. So it does require some sacrifice in that regard. But what I recommend is some tips when it comes to having a step goal is start them early. Meaning, if you, let's say, if you start trying to hit your steps at like 6 o'clock at night, you're not really setting yourself up for success. So start them early. If you can, go for a quick walk in the morning before work or on your break. Literally, it doesn't have to be long. People, I think, underestimate the value of just getting short, quick walks in spread throughout the day. It's like, if you go for like a 10-minute walk, that's easy, like 1,000 steps. Whereas if you sit on your bum during your shift or during your break, then that's you 1,000 steps behind. And I'm not sure if you get 2 breaks at work or whatever, but if you can go for, let's say, a 10-minute walk before, instead of sitting on your phone in the morning, 10-minute walk on your break, and then that's already 2,000 steps just from there. And probably walking about your work, you probably got much more than that in reality. So you have a plan to hit your step goal and stick to it. You can be flexible with it. If you've got a social event or something, I'm not telling you have the exact same plan, or if you've got something on, I'm not telling you can't be flexible. But when your days are pretty similar, when you've got not much on, keep a step goal in place and keep it kind of consistent in regards to how you hit it, and it'll be so much easier to hit it. And all these habits contribute basically towards eating less calories and minimizing hunger, and maximizing satiety. And what I'd say is, with your diet, make sure you've got routine. So make sure you've got routine with what foods you're eating, and roughly when you eat, roughly uh, how much you eat in each meal. Just because in order for not tracking to work, you need to know you're in a deficit, and it's hard to know that you're in a deficit if you're eating sporadically every single day, different times, different portions, different amount of meals. So the less moving parts, the less variables at play, the less things that are changing on a daily basis, the more likely you are to actually have a good grasp on what's going on. You're not shooting in the wind, you're not totally winging it or guessing, because the thing about tracking is it just basically allows you to know how much calories you're eating. So if you're not tracking, the way to know how much calories you're eating is to eat a consistent diet or to eat similar foods. For example, if I'm on a meal plan now, if I remove, let's say, carbohydrates, or let's say just food in general, if I remove calories from each meal, if I remove food from each meal, I'm probably going to lose weight, or I'm not going to continue to gain weight anyway, because I'm bulking it now. Same applies, like if you're not tracking, but you're having structure, you're having similar meals on a daily basis, you're having a lot of routine, and then you take food away from it and you wear at maintenance, you're probably going to lose weight. The only caveat to that is if you're obviously changing something else. So that's the thing about not tracking. It's not as foolproof because you don't know exactly what you're doing. However, it does give you a bit, or not even more flexibility. I wouldn't say you have that much more flexibility without tracking. You might even have more flexibility tracking because you can have a bit more variety of your food choices. But if you want to not track, it's good to have your routine and nutritional habits similar so you know you're in a deficit. A good example is when I was on holiday in Tenerife, I had structure with what I ate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And what basically done was kept it pretty similar on a day-to-day basis. It might seem weird, it might seem a bit crazy, but I took my weighing scales with me. So I just stood on the scales in the morning, seen my body weight. If my body weight was up drastically, I ate a bit less the next day. If it was down, I ate a bit more. And it wasn't restrictive. I still had plenty of food. I still enjoyed the holiday. I still had desserts every single night. What I basically done was jumped on the scales. If my weight was up, I had one dessert instead of three. If my weight was down, I had three desserts instead of one. I had a bit bigger portion for breakfast one day and a bit smaller another. So basically, if you're doing something very similar, like I done on holiday, I had similar amount of plates, similar composition of plates, if that makes sense, for every meal. Obviously, having different food choices, etc. But I done that, measured my weight, then changed it accordingly. So ate less or ate more. But it's different. In For myself, I've been tracking for years. I've been doing this for years, so I've got like a really good grasp on how much calories or what I need to do to lose or gain weight. But it's just kind of giving you an example. But in order for this to work, in order to lose weight without tracking, you still need discipline. You still need structure. You still need to be hungry and restrictive at times. And you've got the same sacrifice as tracking, really. You've got the same thing you're kind of putting, or you're giving up as tracking, having as much food variety, having as much uh, choices in your diet, having as much food in your diet and calories as a whole. And people say you can eat anything and lose weight. Yes, but what do you think you're going to adhere to best? Having a whole food diet with a ton of food, a ton of fruit and veg, or having a McDonald's breakfast, lunch, and dinner? What do you think is going to fill you more? What do you think is going to give you more energy and feel better on and perform better on? So, although you can eat anything and lose weight, doesn't mean it's going to be the best for adherence and sticking to it long term. And with doing this, you're guessing, you're shooting in the wind a bit more. It's not foolproof. So if you've got, let's say, a deadline and you really need to lose a certain amount of weight for, and maybe you're an absolute beginner, this might not be the way to lose weight for yourself. And in terms of it doesn't work, basically, whatever you're doing, have routine, have structure, swap foods and aim for lower calories. So if you're currently having, let's say, I'm not sure. Let's say you're having ketchup, just normal ketchup. Swap that for low salt and sugar ketchup. If you are having pasta for dinner, half the pasta intake increase to fruit and veg. So just kind of put things in place, implement things in place that help you be in a deficit. Have leaner meat sources instead of fattier meat sources. Have bagel thins instead of whole bagels. And again, you want to have a similar structure with your meals, meaning a similar amount of maybe each food. Obviously, you can make swaps, etc., and have different meals on a daily basis. But what I mean is, for breakfast, one day you don't want to have an absolute massive bowl of cereal, a banana, a protein shake, and toast, and then the next day you don't want to have just oats and whey because there's going to be a different calorie composition. So keep things similar so you can compare it and make changes accordingly. And pretty much it's a case of also learning to be hungrier and putting more habits in place if it is not working, and just putting up with hunger because hunger is part of it, and obviously putting those habits in place that I spoke about earlier. And in terms of who this doesn't work for, people have a ton of variety in what their days look like on a daily basis. They might find this more difficult. People who want to be super accurate and have got like a deadline, typically people in the later stages of a fat loss phase, as they can't rely on their intuitive eating because their overall hunger will be higher. They're further away from where their set point was, where their maintenance calories was, which is going to generally make it a bit harder to adhere to. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Hope you took some valuable information from it. If you did, feel free to share the podcast on your story. I greatly appreciate anyone's support. And same with any other manner you support the podcast. And if it's subscribing, liking, leaving a rating or a review, I greatly appreciate everyone. So hope everyone has a great day, and thanks for listening or watching.